Welcome. Today I'll be talking about layers in Photoshop. Layer is when you have something lying over or under something else, and there can be multiple layers. For example, if you look at this image, you can see you have layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. It could be multiple. It simply shows something lying over or under something else. Now we have different types of layers. Now the type of layer we have is we have one, the raster layer, we have the smart object layer, we have the adjustment layer, we have the text layer. Now let me just throw light on each of this layer very quickly. For the raster layer is made up of pixels. As you can see, this basketball, let me zoom it out. You can see this basketball. Now this is a raster layer. And now why is it raster? Because once I reduce this image and try to expand it, you will see pixels. Now let's do that very quickly. I'll pick my tool, move tool, select this, Control T to transform, put my mouse at this edge and I drag down. You can see this basketball has reduced to a very small size, and I press enter to apply this. Now if I'm to expand this basketball, you start seeing the pixels. You can see it's no more sharp. You can see the pixels at the edges. You can see if I expand this, is what you see at these edges, you'll see all over the image. You can see it on the lines of the ball. That's how that's what happens to the raster layer. Once you reduce it and apply it, you can't expand it because once you try to expand it, you will lose detail of the image. Now let's go to the next type of layer, which is the smart object layer. Now for the smart object layer, you can see this basketball can now convert it to a smart object. Once you increase and reduce, you don't lose detail of the image. The image comes out the way it is. Why? Because it's a preview. Now let's quickly convert this image into a smart object. You can do that by simply right click on the layer, then you click convert to smart object. Now how do you know this image is a smart object? If you look just by the side, you can see this icon here on this layer. Now this is a smart object. So if I reduce this image and I apply enter and I increase it, it's still the same. Why? Because it is a preview of the original image. And this way, um, the details are still intact. You have not lost any detail as it is. Now the next thing is the adjustment layer. Now for the adjustment layer, if you look at this layer here, we'll have the gradient. It is called an adjustment layer. So if I click on this color, it's actually the adjustment layer icons. If I click here, I can actually choose any of this layer, either the hue, saturate tone, the gradient layer, right? Then is it. Click here. On this adjustment layer, you can actually adjust the color of your background. I can change this to purple, for example. Right. So that's the adjustment layer. Then the text layer, you can see on this layers here, we don't have any text. So I'm going to introduce the text by clicking here, and I will type. I click on this and I will type ball. So the text layer is also another kind of layer. All these layers are different. The text layer is identified with the T. The smart layer by this icon. I also have the raster layer, which I just explained that by the time will lose its value if you reduce and you increase it. So the next thing we want to talk about is the background layer. Now let's talk about this background layer. Let me deactivate this. Now was the image before I removed the ball from it. So let's talk about the background layer. Now something you need to understand about the background layer, you cannot rename it just the way I will rename just the way I will rename this layer. I can rename this by double clicking on it and I'll say to you can say select enter. I'll rename this layer. Right. If I double click here, it will not. Instead, it will pop up and ask me to rename it here. Right. It's after doing this, I can now click OK and rename. So the easiest way to rename your background layer is by clicking on this padlock just once. Now it stays, and I can now rename it. Or you double click on it to rename it. Now, another thing about the background layer you need to understand is for the background layer, you cannot change its position. Right? I can move this layer from here to here. You see? I can move it down, but I cannot change the position of the background layer because it's locked. And that's why it's the background layer. So we want this to be the background. So let me make it the background. If, for example, I want this to be my background, if I want this to be my background, yeah, I can actually lock this in to be my background. If I want this to be my background, I click on it. I come to layer, new, background, new layer. So now this is my new background layer. So if this is all I want to see, this is my background layer. It remains fixed. Let's assume I don't want this other background. And quickly, let me just show you something quickly. How to delete a layer. I don't need these two layers because I've extracted what I want from it. I can delete them individually or I can take them in pairs by selecting both, shift, and I'll select both. Then I'll drag to this recycle bin. I'll delete it. So now I have my background layer. I cannot move anything below it. I cannot change position because it's what I want. So I've locked this to be my background layer. Now the next thing I want to talk about is to talk about image. Now we've talked about raster layer and most images, right, are actually saved as the raster layer, right? So when working with an image, to be able to retain all the details in your image, you need to convert into a smart object, right? So that they don't lose details of your image. So now I'm going to be working with this basketball. So let me work with this basketball for example. This is an image, all right? And I've explained that for every image you work with, it's best you convert into a smart object, which I've showed you how to do that, so that by the time you try to adjust it by pressing Ctrl T and you're adjusting your image left to right, you still have the details of your image. Now, the good thing about converting your image layer into a smart object is this. Now, if you convert your image into a smart object and you mistakenly pick your brush or eraser tool, right, you can't brush over it, you can't clean it. That's just what happened. You can't clean it. Why? Because it's made up of, because it's now a smart object. But if this is not a smart object, see what happens. Let me double click on this to get the image. Now let me use this. Now, if this is the original image, if this is not a smart object, this is a raster image, for example, and I pick my eraser tool, once I brush over it, you can see that I'm brushing over it. It's cleaning it, right? If I pick my brush tool, for example, I can paint over it. Now, why are you seeing all those boxes there? Because it's an empty background. I can choose to introduce a background by clicking my adjustment layer, add solid color. Okay, I think I'm fine with yellow without doing much. Then I move this below it, making it my background. So if I'm to brush over this, everything. If I'm to use my eraser tool, everything becomes yellow. All I just need to do is to keep brushing or increase the intensity. Let me change the color of my brush to blue. So that's just what happens when your image is not saved in a smart object. On the text layer, you can have your text layer in the foreground or the background. That's why I said layer. These are stacks of something lying above or below. You can see very clearly the all is behind the basketball. By clicking on it, click on the text layer, you can move it. You can choose to move it here. You can choose to bring it here. But you can see very clear that it is behind the layer, while this is just above. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is we've talked about how to select multiple layer by holding a shift and selecting the layers. Um, Now there's what I call visibility in layers. Visibility in layer. Now I'm interested in working on this text all, right? All I need to do to make it very visible, I hold my Alt key and I'll click this eye icon. You can see it just picks that out and I can do what I have to do. And I'm done. Once I'm done, hold my Alt key and I click on it back. So I can work on it independently. I want to see just the image. I'll click on the eye icon of this basketballer. I'll hold my Alt key and I have just the basketballer. To go back, I hold my Alt key and I click on the eye again. It takes me back. So that's one. That's something about the eye visibility, layer visibility, which you need to understand. Currently, the way this image is, you can see they are all on different layers, right? Now, once you're done working on your project, whatever project you're working on, having multiple layers could be, and you just it's very good actually, but sometimes you just want to fuse everything so that when you want to print, nothing moves, right? Everything remains where it is. So it's expected that you merge it. And how do you merge it? By selecting the multiple layers. For example, I want to merge this tree and select it, shift, and select the top one here. Or I hold control and select them one after the other. And once I'm done with that, I have to press my control E to group them together. Now, with the way it is, you can see all these are grouped together. So I can now choose to reposition this work at the center or wherever I want it to be on my background, right? You can see? So this is what happens. Then you can now lock the background and your work together by holding shift and selecting the background and doing the same thing, pressing Control E. Now, if for example, there's something you need to do and you've forgotten, or you just remember after looking it, there's a way to go about it. You come to your history panel, you click on it, then you move a step back to the point where you think you need it. Okay, I want it back to, I want to separate the layer from this group, or I want to take it back to where I have all the visibilities, all the layers still separated. You can actually do that. Then once you make your adjustment, you merge it in and you go and you move on with your work. Now the concept of background is this one. The background cannot be renamed. For you to rename it, you need to click on the lock icon or you double click on it to pop up the name where you have to rename it. You cannot change its stacking order. For example, I cannot move the background in between layer 2 and all. It won't stay. So basically, these are some of the things you can do with your layer. If you have learned one or two things about the use of layer, please click the like button, click the subscribe button, and follow for more. Also take time out to look at my previous videos on everything you need to know about Photoshop and come back with questions and let me know what you would like to learn next. Thank you. See you in my next video.